Ida B. Wells was kicked off a train for refusing to move from the Jim Crow car 70 years before Rosa Parks was arrested. She later campaigned for anti-lynching and became one of the founding members of the NAACP. She also campaigned for women's suffrage and famously stepped into the middle of the whites-only section of a segregated suffragette parade in 1913 in Washington, D.C. Shirley Chisholm was the first African-American woman to be elected to Congress in 1969 and went on to serve 7 terms. She became the first black woman to run for president in a majority party in 1972. Throughout her career, she received numerous death threats and even had to sue in order to be included in televised debates. Mary McLeod Bethune created her own boarding school, which eventually turned into Bethune-Cookman University in Florida. She later worked her way up in various presidential administrations, and Harry Truman even sent her to the United Nations founding conference in 1945, where she was the only black female present. Bessie Coleman was the first African-American female pilot in the United States. She was forced to learn how to fly in France because no white pilots would teach her back in the States. She later opened a flight school open to everyone, but suffered a tragic death while practicing a dangerous stunt for an upcoming air show. Everyone knows Coretta Scott King was MLK's wife, but she was so much more. She not only raised their 4 children, but she also played a huge role in everything that MLK did, and continued to fight for civil rights after his assassination. She campaigned against apartheid in South Africa and eventually convinced Reagan to make MLK Day a national holiday. She represents many of the unsung wives in history who have fought at home and on the front lines without proper recognition. Diane Nash was one of the founding members of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, also known as SNCC. She organized sit-ins, coordinated and participated in the 1961 Freedom Rides, and played a huge role in the Selma Right to Vote movement that pushed the government to pass the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Sarah Breedlove was the first child in her family to be born outside of slavery. She was an inventor and entrepreneur who became the first self-made female African-American millionaire when she created her hair care empire. You may know her better by her business name, Madam C.J. Walker. Dorothy Dandridge was the first African-American woman to be nominated for an Academy Award for Best Actress. She was incredibly popular in the 1950s, but fell victim to black typecasting and actually turned down many roles because they painted black women in such a negative light. She was one of the first actresses that tried to push through the color barriers of Hollywood and paved the way for black actors and actresses of the future.